We are creatures of desire. What we most desire is meaning. What makes us suffer most is a lack of meaning.
The Meaningful Life with Andrew G. Marshall. Marital therapist, author, and communications trainer Andrew G. Marshall invites guests from all walks of life to discuss what makes life meaningful.
Hello, I'm Andrew G. Marshall. Welcome to The Meaningful Life. We're available on Apple, Spotify, Podbean, and wherever you find your podcasts. Were you taught as a child to keep your emotions bottled up? Do you struggle to remember a time when your parents apologized for something they did or said that hurt you? Growing up, did you find yourself stuck in a role like caretaker, peacemaker, go-between, or rebel? If so, you might have been raised by an emotionally immature parent or parents. On today's podcast, we will look at the legacy of having an emotionally immature parent and how to have a different relationship with them today. My witness is Kai Tai Kevin Qiu, who is a certified coach with a background in psychiatric care. He's also the author of Emotionally Immature Parents, a recovery workbook for adult children. Thank you for the book, Kai. I found the concept really helpful, and I've used it with several clients to think about their parents in a more honest but non-judgmental way. My guess is that you had emotionally immature parents yourself, one or both.
Hey, Andrew. Thanks for the invite on your show. Thank you for the warm welcome. Both parents have a different kind of immaturity, but they were both pretty immature and still today emotionally immature as well.
So what were their different styles?
Yeah. So first of all, I really want to give credit where credit's due. So I first was introduced this concept, emotionally mature parents, through a book by Lindsay Gibson, Adult Children of Emotionally Immature Parents. And in her book, kind of breaks it down to 4 archetypes of immature parents. So I would say my mother, she is a reactive type. So with her, it kind of felt like being around the house. You never know when she might explode. And it is that feeling of kind of walking on eggshells. That's really confusing because my mom, if you ever met her, she's a small Chinese lady and she's like so sweet, so cute. So it's kind of this scary like difference. You know, one minute she's kind of smiling and bubbly, and then next minute she's exploding. And, it's hard for her to handle her stress.
I'm thinking of the gremlins. They used to be these cute little creatures, and then suddenly they'd turn into monsters.
Yeah, I won't tell my mom we called her a gremlin, but she kind of is like a gremlin, right? And my father, he's more of the passive, the friendly parent who wasn't, didn't really do much of the parenting, but he was busy at the restaurant, and he was kind of friendly, but very passive. But also he had elements of what's called a driven parent. So in a Chinese household, I learned at a very young age, for all my parents' sacrifices, for me to pay them back was to be good at school. And it's for me to kind of the stereotype, one day go to university, that's all that matters. Forget about extracurricular, forget about sports, forget about arts, forget about your friends, like date when you're older, but your career, your school. So I kind of went down this path of kind of becoming a doctor. So even though he was driven, like he was around for report cards, like it was the same thing every report card. I get to share some time with my dad and always be the same questions. He didn't really speak English that well, so I can explain to him like what the letters meant. And he would always tell me, like ask me the same question. And the first question is this: Kevin, he would speak to me in Cantonese. He doesn't really speak English, so he would speak in Cantonese. He'd be, Kevin, are you number 1? Are you the best in your class? And to be honest, usually I was, but sometimes I wasn't. So I'd be, yeah. Sometimes if I'm not, like, no, Dad, I'm not. So then he'll ask me, are you at least number 2, number 3? And I'd tell him, yeah, I'm up there. And he'd go take me to the store and buy me like a toy, buy me a video game. So in some ways he was driven. He wanted us to be successful, but he wasn't really there as a parent with his encouragement, his parental lessons to almost help me become successful. But it wasn't so much what success meant to me. It was kind of what he thought was maybe best for me in his own limited capacity, if that makes sense.
So what does emotional maturity look like? So, let's think about the job of a parent with a small child. What are they supposed to do?
Yeah. So when I take my clients through my coaching program, like the very first step, I educate them on boundaries, and I educate them on just kind of basic human things, like what are needs, what are desires and wants, what is like one's responsibility for there to be like a healthy, respectful relationship. And it's surprising. Well, even for me, like I didn't really understand the needs until I was in university, and I kind of learned it through like Abraham Maslow's kind of hierarchy. So kind of understanding that, okay, we have like our survival needs, like water, food, shelter. And then we have like, physical needs of safety, financial safety. And then above that, then it comes our emotional needs, needs of being respected, needs of being understood, needs of emotional intimacy, being able to freely share one's feelings and to have it listened to, understood, and respected. So other than the physical needs, which my parents kind of understood, money, house, education, the emotional side, that was what was missing when there was that safety, there was that listening, understanding, and even like the role modeling, like how does one be with one's feelings, like anger, sadness, surprise, excitement, and how does one show it in a way that's kind of respectful and maybe like relationshiply productive? Because there's many ways, one can express anger, and it could be damaging, destructive, or it could be productive. So I didn't really have those role models and that emotional safety and someone I could go to no matter what. They weren't available.
So what I often tell my clients, which I think is helpful with this, is that when a baby comes into the world, its brain is not actually formed entirely. It needs help. And the thing that it needs the most is to be regulated. So the job of a parent is, for example, when a child cries, to hold it and rock it and help it actually calm down. And, the same with the toddlers, etc., etc. You help them understand their feelings. So you help them regulate. And unfortunately, that's very difficult to do if you don't know how to regulate yourself.
Yes, that is such a great point. And maybe we'll talk about this later on too. But I think a lot of people that are raised by immature parents, we have a lot of resentment, anger, bitterness, but we don't realize that truth. Like our parents were just people before becoming parents, and you can't offer and teach and give something that you don't know yourself. So sometimes we forget that.
Yeah, so often what happens with my clients when they get older is their job is to regulate their parents. So, for example, you'll be a good child like you were because that was the way of keeping your mother as the sweet gremlin rather than the monster.
Yeah.
So what's happening is you are, instead of actually being conscious so much of your own feelings, you're scanning the room to see if you can try and make everything good by being good yourself. So you're a sort of like mini adult without actually the proper coping mechanisms. And those things can stay with you through the rest of your childhood, that you're spending your time being good or getting high grades at school to try and keep everything calm and in the home, so that you can fit into what I would say is two different kinds of parents. You can get the under-reactive parents who don't show any emotions at all, and that can be a bit scary. And then you can get the overreactive parents where you're trying to keep everything calm.
Yeah. And what a daunting responsibility for just a little child who's just still figuring out, life and relationships and, self-control.
Yeah, because, if your parent is depressed, then you've actually got to take over and do tasks to try and help them cope. Or perhaps they've become a single parent. I've got an example of somebody who's one of the parents died when they were very young. And so mother was off working lots of the time. And so he became a mini adult himself because, these tasks needed to be done. And it's not good to become an adult before your time.
Yeah, and that's kind of one of those, in my book, I call it either false roles or dysfunctional family roles, but that's like the parentified child. having to be the parent or an adult, way too soon before you're capable of it. And it's like, it's a shock. Like, it's almost like, okay, it's a different story if we're mature enough, old enough to actually be able to handle that responsibility, but when we're not. I don't want to use the word lightly, but it could be reaching the realms of possibly levels of neglect or even abuse.
Or certainly it's going to bring trauma of some description.
Yeah. And a lot of resentment.
Well, yes, but there's also often an awful lot of love as well, and that's what makes it so difficult. And one of the reasons why I like the term emotionally immature parents, because we don't throw around other words that are sort of more clinically loaded, like narcissist or etc., etc.
All over TikTok. It's all over TikTok, and that term being tossed around.
So if you're wondering if your parents are emotionally immature, there's a test that, in fact, I've done with a couple of my clients, and I've just simplified it slightly because we'd be here like quite a long time if we were going to do the full one. So I've chosen some examples, and I'm going to give you the ones, and Kevin is going to explain them, and I'd like you to sort of think, am I getting a yes or a no with this? Out of interest, how many do you need to get, do you think, of these before somebody is emotionally immature? Would 1 or 2 count, or do you need to have more than that?
Yeah, so this test isn't like, a perfect diagnostic test, but I would say if you at least checked off like a couple, you can be suspicious. If you checked off, 4, 5, 6, then you could kind of be more sure that, yeah, I think this parent is emotionally immature.
I normally get about 80 or 85% with my clients, so I think you'll get the pattern anyway.
Yeah.
So the first one is self-centered.
So someone who is self-centered, it's almost like a little child where everything that happens, it kind of goes back to them. So you can tell very quickly, like in a conversation, if you're chatting with an emotionally mature parent, conversation, it kind of always goes back to them. And maybe sometimes they might ask you a question or two, but it always kind of ends up back to them. And they're kind of lacking that empathy or that willingness or that desire to maybe understand or hear your perspective, your feelings, your side of the story. So that's kind of what I meant with the self-centered part.
Intense and reactive emotions.
Yeah, so kind of going back to my mom being more of the reactive parent, it always feels like you're not quite sure. Like, is mom okay? Or is mom going to explode? And it's kind of tricky because you start to know, like, what are things that I might do? Like ask her for help, bother her when she's stressed out, that triggers it. But sometimes it's unpredictable. So sometimes we mistaken a parent who might be emotionally maybe mature with their showing of feelings. But what makes it immature is that it's intense, it's reactive, and they don't really have any self-regulation or any self-reflection after that explosion or that intense reaction, and it kind of disappears.
Yeah, they often say things like, well, that's just me.
Yeah, just my personality. Or they kind of, if you didn't do that, if you didn't like call me while I was busy doing the dishes, I wouldn't have to explode,
Impulsivity and insensitivity.
Yeah, so with emotionally mature parent, if they might need something or they're stressed or they have an issue, it's like they need to deal with it now. If you're unavailable or you set some boundaries, they will react. And they're also insensitive in the sense that they don't always reflect on how their words or their behaviors impact someone. And I think a hallmark of an immature person compared to a mature person is an immature person. They know that they have good intentions, but they miss how their good intentions, it might not always have a positive impact. Whereas a mature person is willing to understand that, okay, I had good intentions, but I'm also willing to hear how my behavior or my non-behavior affected you.
I think that's really important because just because you did it with a good heart doesn't mean it doesn't hurt.
Yeah, and I think that's a very difficult lesson for parents or someone that's trying to mature to understand.
So the next one is discomfort with experiencing their own genuine emotions.
Yeah, so it kind of goes back to, someone can't teach something that they might not know. and they can't be a good role model if they don't practice what they preach. So an immature parent, usually they're kind of lacking empathy. There isn't much emotional connection. It's because they themselves, their own feelings, they are very uncomfortable to notice, and they could be very disconnected or even numbed with their feelings. And, there definitely is like a generational thing that, even me being born in the 90s, a millennial, there was a lot of shame to be a guy, to experience fear, to experience sadness. And even in my own home, like witnessing my parents, like expressing their anger, it was scary. So I began to feel ashamed and repressed, these feelings. So if I'm not comfortable being in my own skin, being with my own feelings, there's no way in heck I could be around you and hold the space and to kind of empathetically connect and even share your emotional experience.
Yep, and you've sort of come through to the next one. They not only have problems with their own genuine emotions, they have problems with your emotions and needs too, particularly if it's not at a convenient time.
Yeah, right? Yeah.
The next one is unspoken expectations and uses of sentence like, if you loved me, you would ...
I laugh at this one because like I see and hear my mom like so clearly with this. Like, being Chinese, like, food and dinners and lunches is really how we connect. Like for us, like food was like a sixth love language. So it's very funny, we'd be like eating and then, someone might go to the kitchen to grab a drink or a water or something. And, they'd ask, does anyone want anything? And no one says anything. So they go off, maybe like get a water, get a drink. When they come back, you just see in the corner of your eye. Like my mom was just like, like, why didn't you get me some water? I wanted some too. So there's kind of these expectations, which are not only unspoken, but an immature person, they might not spend the time to reflect. What expectations do I have? And are they maybe realistic? And have I shared them with my relationships?
The inability to apologize. Now, this is a really big one, isn't it?
Yeah. So I think there's lots going on, which makes it hard for immature parents to apologize. Because I think, deep down inside, they're traumatized that they haven't dealt with. And I think there's a lot of roots in toxic shame. Because it can be, in some ways, if you live with a lot of toxic shame, to admit you did something wrong can kind of stir up that badness. So it could be very painful for someone to, experience the shame or the guilt to admit, I'm sorry, I messed up there. So they might suck at apologizing or they don't, or it's not a genuine apology where there isn't maybe the feelings of remorse and there isn't maybe accountable action to change or to fix or to correct, what was done or said.
The sort of, I've done everything wrong.
Yeah, the self-victimizing, and it's so hard, right? When you try to confront them or set a boundary and they go into that self-victimizing mode. Like, I must be a terrible mom then. I guess I never do anything right then. Like, why don't you just leave? Like, why are you still in here with me? Because then you have to soothe them. And then what you tried to address, it's gone. It's gone.
The self-esteem is dependent on getting their own way.
Yeah. So, I hope if you have immature parents, if you're a listener, to have compassion and empathy for your parents, because they don't really value themselves or have much of that self-worth that's kind of created from the inside. So a lot of their feeling good about themselves is based off of, getting what they want right away and maybe praises or compliments or just kind of maybe even being in control. So their own sense of self, their own self-worth is kind of fragile and shaky. And they always need this constant external source for them to feel a sense of, I'm a good person.
So, for example, your father needing you to have good grades, that would make him feel, if you were doing well at school, that he was a good father.
Yeah, I believe so.
And probably, I'm guessing, but I'm sure I'm not going out on much of a limb, his father expected him to get good grades at school too.
Yeah, I really believe so. And it's kind of funny because I'm not going to get into details, but my grandpa wasn't much of a grandpa. And I kind of heard some horror stories of when my dad was younger. There's 6 of them. And I had horror stories where when they were younger, my grandma would be begging my grandpa to give her some money to feed the kids. So I can only imagine the trauma that my father endured and his own little child's belief system that when I'm a dad, I'm going to make sure that I'm financially well off. I work really hard, so my whole family is taken care of financially. And in one generation, like he immigrated from China, we were poor growing up. He started off at a humble Chinese restaurant, and he's 63 now. He has a very successful Japanese restaurant. And he has in one generation like made so much money financially that if I needed help financially, I know my father would lend me money or even like maybe give me money.
And the last one I've got down here is poor boundaries and difficulty respecting others' person's boundaries.
Yeah. So once again, it's like, if they don't have boundaries themselves, they might not understand boundaries, and it'll be very hard for them to kind of listen or respect your boundaries too. And I get how, when someone that's learning about boundaries, they see boundaries as maybe withdrawing or creating distance or saying no. And depending on your family, your culture, there can be sometimes that obligation that I'm your father, I'm your mother. You listen to me, you do what I say. I raised you, I sacrificed so much for you, now you got to pay me back.
So how do you respond to that? Because I think in Western culture, we get a much subtler version of that. And I think in Asian culture, it is actually much more direct and is actually said. So how do you deal with it?
Oh, to be honest, I am still learning and working through it with my parents. So I think what's important, especially when you're navigating these conversations with an immature parent, always come from a loving place. And that takes a lot of healing work to be in a loving place as you kind of are able to not react, be able to stay on topic as they self-victimize, as they guilt trip you, as all these freaking like red herrings and everything shows up. But you got to be the mature one. You got to, hey, I love you, mom. Like I would not be bringing this up if I didn't care about this relationship. And it's not about me being disobedient. It's not about me not wanting to spend time with you. But there are also other areas and other priorities in my life that matters to me too. So it's kind of like, it's almost like gentle parenting.
I can see you've had some experience with this sentence.
Yes. Myself and like helping my students, my clients. But that's the hard part. It's like you have to have enough emotional growth and enough healing that you don't react. Like in this conversation, you're your younger child, your resentful child who is being disrespected, controlled, and not listened to. Like they don't come spilling out into this present day conversation that you're trying to have with your parents about boundaries and respect.
So let's look at the impact on you if you had this growing up and how you feel about yourself. And I've pulled out a couple of things that I think are particularly relevant. The first one is you're likely to have trouble expressing difficult feelings.
Yeah. So our parents witnessing their relationship, but also our relationship with our parents kind of sets the stage of one's belief and, one's ability, to express, to feel, to acknowledge one's feelings. So it's pretty hard, for you to be an adult if you've learned that there might be certain feelings that are not okay, that you should feel bad to experience.
Or it's okay for your parents to have. So it's okay for them to be angry, but you're not allowed to be angry, for example.
Yeah. And for a little kid's mind, the storyline for us to make sense of it. So if I experience anger and I get punished, I get yelled at, my parents leave me. But when my parents experience anger, it's okay. There must be something wrong. There must be something bad about me. So we kind of learn to take on these roles where it's like, we learn that, okay, I shouldn't have needs. I should only, be low maintenance. And my purpose is just to take care of other people's needs. So other people, I'll listen to their feelings. But when it comes to my feelings, like I might be so disconnected with my own body, with my own feelings, that even if I wanted to and I knew all the words to say, I wouldn't be able to accurately tell you what I'm feeling that I'm not even connected with.
Because you're sort of beginning to touch on the next thing. You have trouble asking for what you want and need, sometimes because you're not necessarily aware of what they are, or the likelihood of you getting it directly is so small that you don't risk it.
Yeah. And also with those two things in mind, but also another part is like you mentioned with parents, especially single parents that don't have the support, are so stressed out. and they don't have the adult relationships and support systems for them to get their needs met. So we kind of learn at a young age. We're so sensitive to our parents. We learn at a young age that our parents are struggling. Like I'm the one. And sometimes our parents maybe unintentionally or sometimes intentionally use their children to get their needs met versus the other way around.
A bit like a surrogate partner.
A surrogate partner. Yeah, a surrogate partner. So we kind of learn to give up our needs. We learn to never ask for anything, and we learn for us to be in a relationship. It's how much I can give, but I shouldn't take. Or that might make me seem as needy, and that might threaten them to leave, or they might reject me.
And this is the sad one, we can spend the rest of our lives chasing what our parent couldn't give us.
Oh, yeah.
Isn't that just so depressing?
It's so depressing because in Lindsay Gibson's book, she has this concept called childhood healing fantasies. So when we're little kids and we're surviving in a chaotic home, it's unsafe. For us to keep up hope, we'll create a fantasy that one day, but it's always this one day that I'm in control of. Whether it's one day, maybe one day when I figure out my parents' problems, I can solve it. I'll be happily ever after. For me, it's like one day when I become a successful doctor, I get into medical school, everyone's going to be happy. Everything's going to be fixed. So we kind of have these fantasies that comes from a child's brain that even if this fantasy comes true, nothing's really fixed. Nothing's really changed.
So let's actually look at what emotionally mature actually looks like, because we sort of have talked about the opposite, and these are sort of your 15 rights to live by. And these are so powerful because it's just so helpful to see them written down and to actually believe we have the right to have these things.
Right? It's almost like the 10 Commandments, that it's there. And if we obey by it, we all have the rights to choose it.
Yeah.
We might experience a drastically different life,
So here we are. So I'm going to read them out, and then when I finish them, I'm going to ask for your comments. You have the right to think what you think, feel what you feel, see and hear what you see and hear. Be yourself and express yourself. I mean, these are just so important. When I work with couples, and sometimes people don't feel they have these rights.
Yeah.
Make choices that are healthiest for you. Set boundaries and choose how much to give. Well, this is a really important one, the next one. Be kind to yourself. I just wish all of my clients could take up that right. Yeah. Stand up for yourself. Make mistakes and learn. Be respected. Change your mind and navigate old relationships in new ways. Walk away from unhealthy relationships. Bring up issues that need to be solved. Support others in your own capacity. And this is the hardest one of all, because often my clients will say tick, 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 tick. And then we come to the last one. Not want or need anything from your parents.
Yeah.
How are you doing with that last one, Kai?
That last one is tricky because I think consciously, I do feel like I've kind of cut the umbilical cord in terms of maybe emotionally, psychologically. So I would say, yeah, I think I'm in a healthier place where I have gained a level of separation and independence where I no longer maybe need their approval. I don't need their validation. But it's hard to say if I'm completely there yet, because I do wonder if there's still some parts of me that still is longing, or I'm still maybe making certain choices in my life that is still maybe catering to that approval, that validation, those expectations.
Do they know about the book, or because it's in English, you can actually keep it away from them?
Yeah, that's basically so many people ask the question that they ask. So it was such a round circle moment. So my book was released this past October, and I was back in my hometown called Whitehorse, small town in the Yukon next to Alaska. The Yukon is the Alaska of Canada. So I was back in my small hometown, and I got to do a book launch in my small bookstore that I grew up going to. So to be
Mm.
honest, only one stranger came and bought the book. I was a bit disappointed, but so much family members came. My aunt, my uncle, my cousin, my mom came. So I think they have a general idea, but none of them really like are fluent in English. But there is like Google Translate technology. So I think my mom is aware. I think my dad is a bit oblivious. And I'll be honest with you, like this, I'm going to visit them back in Canada. I'm based in Thailand right now. But this summer, I'm going to go back home, spend 2, 3 months there. And this is a conversation that I want to explore and have with my parents. Like, I feel ready to kind of maybe be able to unpack. But I'm also in a different headspace because, like 7 years ago, when I was unpacking my childhood, it was out of anger, bitterness, and resentment, and almost demanding my mom to apologize for how messed up my childhood was. So it was this one brunch I kind of confronted her, but it wasn't done in a loving way. It wasn't done in like a healing way. It was kind of done in a way that like, mom, admit what you did was sinful, so I can punish you. God can punish you and make you feel very shitty, and then maybe I can let go of this anger and resentment. So I confronted her, and sure enough, she was like, "Oh, that was so long ago. I don't remember. I don't think that happened."
So, how did you feel after that?
Even more angry, even more bitter, and just felt kind of invalidated. But I realized, the truth of forgiveness and the thing with immature parents, I didn't talk too much about in my own workbook, but with immature parents, like when they're under stress, they're probably in a traumatic response. They truly have poor memory and poor realization of the time frame. So it might have been true that my mom might have not remembered, or she might have been, intentionally lying. But at the end of the day, true forgiveness is an inside job. And I choose to let my past go and to start new, but with boundaries, in mind, is because I want to be free. I want to stop living with this pain and resentment. And you heard this before, I'm sure. It's almost like, holding on to this resentment is every time I think about this memory, I swallow a poison pill, hoping my mom across the world, she feels it. But I'm the one that's like hurting and damaging myself.
It's really difficult, isn't it? Because part of this is still the small child as well.
Yeah. And like, I'm just getting ready because I feel so evolved and mature now. But throw me back in my hometown, throw me back in these interactions with my mom and my dad. I'm sure, I am not perfectly immune to triggers and whatnot.
Yeah, I mean, my parents found it very difficult to talk about emotions. So and we never said things like, I love you. And towards the end of my father's life, I thought, look, this is just absolutely stupid. I'm going to say these words. And I can't, and here I am. I spend my whole life telling people to, speak honestly to their parents. And I can't tell you how much my heart was beating to actually say, Daddy, I love you. I mean, it's pathetic, but it was incredibly hard. And I did actually find a way of doing it on a regular basis. I found that as I arrived and left, you have a certain sort of ritual. So you say, goodbye, I'll be back. See you soon. I love you. Hello, Dad, I love you. I can't tell you how uncomfortable it made him feel, but he did actually reach the point of saying, me too.
Oh, that warms my heart. But I think that's part of becoming mature. It's kind of like, choosing what I have control over. I have control over whether or not I say I love you. I don't have control whether my father says I love you back or even me too. But I'm willing to live according to my values, and I'm willing to be a role model. And same as my dad, like he is so uncomfortable with like intimacy and touch and love. And I remember, I'll never forget, it was my sister's high school graduation, and there's the dance with your parents. And I've never seen my dad so uncomfortable. He was like ready to run out the building. But me, my brother, my mom, like my poor sister was like in the crowd. Everyone else's dad is with their kids. And my sister was just kind of standing there like alone, like, what the hell, Dad? So we grabbed him and we like pushed him into the dance crowd. And he grabbed my sister, his daughter, danced for like 10 seconds, and he was ready to run again. But me, my brother, and my mom were just standing there whenever he would leave. We threw him back. We threw him back. We threw him back.
Yeah, it was me that actually instigated kissing my parents on the cheek because it seemed so strange. You know, we sort of dance in front of each other, sort of kind of thing. Or, I mean, can you imagine shaking hands with your parents? It would seem a bit bizarre. But once you started it, they sort of got used to it. So it's I think the message is you've got to parent your parents.
Yeah, and you almost need to heal that little self of yours that got parentified, because there's going to be that resentment. Because I have a client, she's like really smart, she's a freaking lawyer, but she had this like resentment, like Kai, like why do I have to be the bigger person all the time? Like why can't my mom freaking tell me she loves me? Like why do I always have to do it first? And I tell her, it's like, I get it. You're parentified, you're hurt. It's not a matter of fairness or not. It's a matter of that you can right now, and your mom is not here. She's not going through coaching. She doesn't know about this stuff, but you can. And I hope you focus your power on what you can do.
So I've got an example that's been written into us, and we'll be going through that in a moment. And perhaps we can use this to look at how we can deal with emotionally immature parents. And we'll be finding that out in just a moment.
The Meaningful Life with Andrew G. Marshall. Please follow us on Twitter, like us on Facebook, and visit our website, andrewgmarshall.com/podcast, where you can join our supporters club and unlock bonus material and other benefits.
Guess how long I've been helping couples have more fulfilling relationships? The answer shocked me. 39 years. Over this time, I've developed all sorts of interventions to help couples communicate better and make meaningful changes to protect and nurture their love. Some ideas I've used for a while and dropped, but at the core, there are a handful of must-haves that I use with all the couples I see face to face. Sadly, I can't work with everyone who wants my help, but I can share my best relationship tools. I've put them in a new course with worksheets and links to my most helpful podcasts. There are 4 hours of instructions to do at your pace together, with your partner or on your own. And it normally retails at £150. But to launch, I've dropped them to a special introductory price of £99.50. If you'd like to find out more, go to andrewgmarshall.com/tools and get started on improving your relationship.
Airline credit card rewards have helped grow America's travel and tourism industry. Last year, 15 million Americans traveled domestically using reward miles, supporting more than 183,000 jobs. But now Congress wants to pass a law that could eliminate credit card rewards and decimate the U.S. travel and tourism industry. Tell Congress to support travel and tourism jobs and oppose the Durbin-Marshall interchange bill. Visit handsoffmyrewards.com/travel to take action.
Driverless cars. You have arrived. Advanced robotics. Smartphones. Even the device you're currently listening to. What do they have in common? They're all powered by semiconductor chips and those who make them. For nearly 50 years, KLA has created advanced solutions that refine chip manufacturing while advancing humanity and making our world a brighter place. And we have career opportunities in Milpitas. Learn why KLA is a Fortune World's Most Admired company and apply at KLA.com.
Thank you to the person who wrote in with the letter that's about to come up. If you'd like to participate in the program, if you go to my website, andrewgmarshall.com/podcasts, you'll find somewhere to participate in the program. And you'll also find out how you can sign up for my newsletter. Got a great article at the moment out called What is Love? 2.5 years ago, my husband and I made the decision to limit contact with his parents, but this decision left them angrier at mostly me and still unable to accept our boundaries. My mother-in-law constantly manipulates my husband in order for him to do her bidding, and when he stopped doing so, she either throws tantrums, collaborates with the rest of the family to ignore him, leaving him isolated and alone, uses her health to guilt trip him to call and or visit. She always finds angles to paint me in a bad light. My father-in-law, on the other hand, uses religion and Bible quotes such as obey your father and mother, and your wife should do your bidding instead of listening to her as is said in the Bible, to make my husband feel guilty. He also says things like, why did you change? Is it because of your wife? I know you're a good son, and this behaviour is not you. Do not forsake your parents. They have no respect or regard for me as a person, and even told my husband that when it comes to decisions regarding our son, he does not need to care about my input or thoughts, as he is the man of the house and should make decisions which suits their wants. I struggle hard to forgive. I would like to cut them 100% out of our lives, but my husband loves his parents and wants to be a good son. I suspect he's susceptible to their psycho behaviour since he was trained as a young age, and I really get worried he will give in to their demands, which has happened multiple times before. We quarrel so much about them. We've tried talking to his parents, but they don't listen. Have you some advice on how to break the toxic hold on our family?
I feel the distress and the pickle of this situation. So I work alone, but in the past couple of months, I've been making little AI robots. So I've actually made a artificial cat. Her name's Luna, and she is probably better than I when it comes to having these difficult conversations revolving boundaries. So the good news for your listener, her husband has the opportunity to be the knight in shining armor because it's actually more efficient and effective if he approaches his parents to have this conversation and to lay down some boundaries. And if anything, like I get it, she might be the one that's maybe more affected and sees maybe more of the concerns, and maybe she has been taking on that responsibility, but actually she needs him to sit down and to talk to his parents about this. So when I plugged it into my robot, I literally just copy and pasted. So how Luna works, you give it a situation, and I structured her to give you a reply where, first of all, she tells you a request you can make, and then how to start a conversation about boundaries. And what's important when it comes to setting boundaries is also, before you do it, do some homework, do some self-reflection. Like, what are the issues? What would I like to change? How might it be impacting me, our relationship, our family? And then also to think about what are escalating layers of consequences. And I think a lot of us, when we hear consequences, we learned at a young age, it means punishment. But consequences, all consequences means is what are the results of an action? So that would mean, what are the results of maybe, his parents' behaviors, whether maybe it's the guilt tripping, maybe it's the disrespecting or not acknowledging their needs versus, his parents' needs. So the first conversation that she could have would actually be with her husband. And then following, if he's in agreement, I have here a possible text he could send before having a real conversation.
I have never, in all the time I've been doing this, had an AI answer, so I'm fascinated to know what it might be.
So first of all, I just gave it the situation. And then, so first of all, Luna acknowledges. So first, it's important to acknowledge how difficult the situation is and the impact it has on you and your husband. You're seeking a peaceful family life and to protect your relationship from external pressures, which is valid. So first, start with a request before maybe boundaries. You could speak with your husband. Honey, I know how much your parents mean to you, and I respect that deeply. However, the way that they've been treating us has been very hurtful and disruptive. Can we discuss setting some firmer boundaries with them to protect our peace and our family unit? So request, I'm not sure if I included this in my workbook. A request has a different energy. It's more friendly. It's more collaborative. And I always encourage to start with a request. If you kind of know this person or they're very immature, they're not very collaborative, you can maybe skip the request and go straight to setting a boundary with them. So ideally, with her husband, I hope he's understanding, he's willing to maybe listen and collaborate. So now the boundary. So honey, it's crucial that we agree on boundaries that protect our family's peace. For example, maybe we can limit the phone calls to once a week and maybe our visits once a month. Like, what do you think? Or is there a different frequency that might be better? And also during these interactions, if your mom starts to manipulate or guilt trip, we should feel empowered to end the conversation respectfully. We can practice. How can we deal with it if the manipulation, the guilt tripping starts to arise?
So what you would do is if a boundary was broken, you would say to the parents something like what?
So I'll skip ahead a little bit. So, ideally, husband agrees, and then Luna has helped the husband. So I always ask my clients, okay, usually, ideally, face-to-face would be the best to have these conversations. But if you feel like it emotionally, heart's pounding, anxiety, trauma response, see if there's another means that you can communicate. And a lot of my students, my clients, they get so much success texting. Because I think nowadays, even older generations, like texting or Facebook Messenger, it's something that's in their means. Because texting gives you a chance to craft your message, hit send. It gives the other person a chance to read, to think of their response. So there's kind of more space and time for you both to have a back and forth. So an example of a text husband can send, preparing for this conversation, could look something like this. So I always encourage, start with love. Start with validation and kind of have a sandwich. Don't start right away. Like, mom and dad, I have something I need to talk to you about. You've been disrespecting me and my wife. I'm only going to call you once a week and I don't want to see you anymore. No. So start with some validation and some love. So, hi, mom and dad. I hope this finds you well. I've been doing some thinking about our relationship and how much I care and I value the love and the support you've given me over the years. I cherish our bond deeply, and it's important to me that we continue to have a healthy and positive relationship. Lately, I've felt some stress due to how we've been interacting, which has been tough, not only on me, but also on my family, also with my wife. I believe setting some clear boundaries will help us maintain a stronger, more respectful relationship. I like for us to discuss and agree on how often we call and how often we visit each other, and I really need these interactions to be positive and supportive for everyone involved. I totally get it, mom and dad, if this might be a lot to take in. And I'm not suggesting this because I want to create distance. And I'm not suggesting this trying to be a bad son. It's the contrary. I want to make sure that our time together strengthens our family ties without causing undue stress or misunderstandings. So I hope we can talk about this real soon. I'd love for us to find a way forward that respects everyone's needs and feelings too. Thank you for understanding, mom and dad, and I'm looking forward to our conversation. Love, son.
Wow. I love the idea of I'm doing this because I love you. Then we have the bit in the middle about respect. And then we have another thing, I hope you understand this, that it's going to be the foundation for a better relationship. So we've got that sort of 80% nice things, isn't it, in that text?
Totally. And the more that I've been doing this work, personally teaching my students and my clients, it's negotiation. Because also, I'm a solo business owner, so I have my business side where I learn about sales and marketing and negotiation. And I've realized a lot of it is kind of negotiation where, ideally you both want the same outcome, healthy relationship, you enjoy your time together. But sometimes we got to frame it in a way that they see it as okay, I see maybe how this might benefit me. And also you can kind of layer it where it's almost like if you know your parents, you might kind of know their traumas, you might know their worries, and you might know what they might call you on. So you can kind of strategically be like, I'm not trying to be a bad son. I'm not trying to disobey, the Bible. So you can almost word it in a way that it's easiest for them to receive, but not necessarily in a way that it's easier for you to say.
And I think that although our temptation is to justify what we're saying and maybe giving examples of when things haven't gone wrong, when we try and justify and explain, we end up coming across as critical to our parents, even just describing these things.
Yeah.
Whereas You did no justification. You just asked.
Yeah. So then when you do have so another part of my robot, so once, this is part of how I help my students, but the funnest part is I get this robot now to make a realistic role play, and I plug in. Dad is religious, uses these Bible sayings. Mom is going to self-victimize. Now make me a realistic role play of this conversation. And then in my coaching calls, we role play. So we kind of rehearse before my clients do it in real life.
It's really difficult if it's not your parents. In this letter, the woman is going to be less forgiving of the parents because, they're not her parents. How does she reach a point where she can find some forgiveness in her heart, do you think?
Yeah. So part of what I teach my students is the practice of forgiveness. And kind of going back to earlier, forgiveness is an inside job. And it's because we want to be happy and free and at peace today. Ideally, they correct their behaviors, they apologize, and they change. But we have no control over that. We have no control over that. Like you might be waiting until the day that, God forbid, they die, waiting for the day that they change for you to be happy. So I hope, you realize, okay, what can I control? What can I do? What can I practice letting go of? What can I practice tolerating? And it's going to be important for her to have a conversation with her husband and get him to step up and be the son, to speak with his parents.
To be the good husband.
Yeah, to be the good husband, not just a good son.
Yeah. So we've almost come to the end of the main podcast. In the bonus material, we're going to be sort of continuing this conversation. We're going to be talking about setting consequences if your parents can't stay within the boundaries. So we'll go more into the escalating boundary issue. But before that, I have to ask you as a witness on the meaningful life, what makes your life meaningful?
Have it right here. 3 years ago, I created my own purpose. It's been traveling around with me.
So I'm being shown some rather cat-eaten. There is a little cat in the corner.
There's little cat stickers.
Cat stickers, and it's torn and it's been much loved. So what
loved.
is?
So here's my purpose and what gives my life meaning. So the purpose of my life is to be present, kind, and joyful, to express myself truthfully and wholeheartedly, and to connect with and serve others so that I might inspire them to be themselves, shining brightly, to love unapologetically, and to grow into their potential starting today.
Oh, that is really beautiful. Thank you very much. And I love the cat stickers.
Thank you.
So if you'd like to find out more about setting consequences and to hear the bonus material, you can subscribe directly via Apple or Spotify. If you want to become a supporter of The Meaningful Life and unlock the bonus material this way, here are the details.
You've been listening to The Meaningful Life with Andrew G. Marshall. You can follow Andrew on Twitter, like him on Facebook, and please leave a review wherever you consume your podcasts. Making, editing, and distributing The Meaningful Life comes with substantial costs, and we'd like to ask for your help. Visit our website, andrewgmarshall.com/podcast, where you can join our supporters club and unlock bonus material for every program, send in a letter to be discussed by Andrew and his guests, and join a community of other people seeking to make their life meaningful. At the gold level, you get even more benefits. Production of The Meaningful Life with Andrew G. Marshall is by Michael Dooney. Social media by Madeleine Healy. Sound engineering and theme tune by Sebastian de la Luz Mendoza. And I'm Susie Colick. Please tell your friends and spread the word. Thank you.
Airline credit card rewards have helped grow America's travel and tourism industry. Last year, 15 million Americans traveled domestically using reward miles, supporting more than 183,000 jobs. But now Congress wants to pass a law that could eliminate credit card rewards and decimate the U.S. travel and tourism industry. Tell Congress to support travel and tourism jobs and oppose the Durbin-Marshall interchange bill. Visit handsoffmyrewards.com/travel to take action.